Look closely at these two pieces of paper. This official document right here says your great-grandfather was black. But look at this census record from just 10 years earlier. It clearly states he was native. One of them is a lie, and that lie wasn't a simple clerical error made by a tired clerk. It was a calculated, devastating weapon. For decades, an invisible war was waged against black and indigenous families in the United States. There were no marching armies, and the battlefields weren't fought with guns. Instead, the weapons were ink, ledgers, and rubber stamps. By simply changing a single racial classification on a birth certificate, a marriage license, or a property deed, entire generations were legally erased. This is the reality of paper genocide. Today, we're going to uncover how a shadowy network of government bureaucrats, men who held the power of a god over a filing cabinet, realized that the easiest way to steal a family's ancestral land wasn't through physical force, it was by legally defining them out of existence. Once the paperwork changed, the land rights vanished. Millions of acres of property stolen right out from under the people who worked it, all because of a single swapped word in a dusty county archive. Today, we're going to trace the ink back to the source, exposing the systemic erasure and bureaucratic violence that altered American history forever. Welcome to the reclassification trap. To understand how millions of acres of land were stolen without a single shot being fired, we have to look at a chilling phenomenon known as paper genocide. This wasn't physical extermination, it was bureaucratic violence, the systemic erasure of a people's legal existence. Imagine building a life, clearing acres of timber and farming land promised to your ancestors by federal treaty. You hold the deed, you possess the family photographs, but deep inside a smoke-filled government office miles away, a clerk you have never met decides your bloodline is inconvenient. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, census takers and state registrars wielded an extraordinary, terrifying power, the eyeball test. When these government agents visited rural communities, they rarely asked families how they identified. They looked at the color of their skin and the texture of their hair and unilaterally assigned them a racial category on official ledgers. Suddenly, a family that had been legally recognized as indigenous for generations and was therefore protected by sovereign land rights was forcibly reclassified as colored or black. This was not a mistake. It was a highly organized system of dispossession. The moment a family was reclassified on paper, their legal claim to native land treaties evaporated overnight. The state could suddenly declare that the tribal land belonged to no one, confiscating it under the guise of public domain before auctioning it off to white settlers or corporate interests.
The psychological toll was devastating. Imagine holding a photograph of your grandparents in traditional regalia, yet the state hands you a piece of paper telling you your own history is a fiction. One of the most notorious architects of this system was Walter Plecker, a Virginia registrar who weaponized vital statistics. He ruthlessly ordered clerks to hunt down birth and death certificates and retroactively alter them to eliminate the legal existence of Native Americans in his state. He threatened midwives and doctors with prison if they recorded a child as indigenous. With the simple stroke of a pen, ancestral inheritances vanished, plunging thousands of black and indigenous families into generations of manufactured poverty. To truly comprehend the sheer scale of the land and history that was stolen, we have to look past the bureaucratic ledgers and the red ink. We have to understand the deep, unbreakable bloodlines that the American government tried so desperately to untangle and erase. For centuries, the stories of black and indigenous Americans weren't just parallel, they were intrinsically braided together. As the brutal machinery of chattel slavery expanded across the South, thousands of enslaved Africans made a daring, dangerous choice. They didn't flee north, they fled south and west, disappearing into the uncharted swamps and dense frontiers. Here, they found refuge with Native American tribes who were also fighting to survive colonial expansion. The most famous of these powerful alliances birthed the Black Seminoles. In the unforgiving terrain of the Florida Everglades, escaped slaves and indigenous Seminoles didn't just coexist, they intermarried. They blended African rice-growing techniques with native agricultural wisdom. Together, they built hidden, thriving settlements known as Maroon societies, sanctuaries of absolute freedom completely off the federal grid. Imagine the psychological triumph of that existence. You are raising your children in freedom, cultivating land that is entirely yours, surrounded by a family that represents a beautiful fusion of two resilient peoples. They didn't just farm together, they fought together. During the Seminole Wars in the mid-1800s, Afro-Indigenous warriors mounted one of the fiercest, most successful guerrilla resistances in U.S. history, bleeding into the exact same soil to protect their shared homes. For generations, these families lived with dual identities. You could be Black and Native. You were a product of survival and unity. But this unity terrified the ruling class. A united Afro-Indigenous front was a formidable threat to the plantation economy. More importantly, these blended communities occupied millions of acres of incredibly valuable, resource-rich land. The federal government quickly realized that military force was costing too much blood and treasure.
So the strategy shifted from the battlefield to the filing cabinet. The government understood that if they could legally separate the Black from the Native on paper, they could fracture these communities. If they could force a rigid, singular racial category onto Afro-Indigenous people, classifying them strictly as colored or Black, they would instantly strip them of their sovereign treaty rights. The very land their ancestors fought, farmed, and died to keep would suddenly be legally unprotected, ripe for the taking. By the late 19th century, the United States government unsheathed its most devastating bureaucratic weapon, the Dawes Act of 1887. The stated goal of this legislation was to break up communal native reservations and distribute the land as individual, privately owned plots. But there was a massive, devastating catch. To claim your ancestral land, you had to legally prove your identity by getting your name on the government's official ledgers, known as the Dawes Rolls. This is where bureaucratic violence became an absolute weapon of mass dispossession. To process these applications, government agents introduced the deeply racist pseudoscience of blood quantum. They began measuring human ancestry like mathematical fractions. When Afro-Indigenous families who had lived, bled, and intermarried within the tribes for generations approached the enrollment tents, corrupt federal agents subjected them to the eyeball test. Taking one look at their dark skin and African features, commissioners aggressively denied them entry onto the blood rolls. Instead, they were shunted onto entirely separate ledgers called the Freedmen Rolls. With that single racist administrative decision, their indigenous status was legally erased. They were categorized solely as Black, instantly stripping them of their sovereign land rights. But the ultimate insult, the true systemic erasure, was happening simultaneously at the very same desks. While Black natives were being legally written out of existence, opportunistic white settlers saw a massive, highly lucrative loophole. They realized that getting onto the Dawes Rolls meant securing hundreds of acres of free, resource-rich land. So they simply bought their way in. This birthed the shameful, widely documented phenomenon of the $5 Indian. White Americans with absolutely zero indigenous ancestry literally paid corrupt federal clerks a $5 bribe under the table to be falsely registered as Native Americans. With the quiet slip of a few gold coins across a shadowed ledger, a white family became legally Indian. They instantly inherited vast tracts of stolen wealth, including land that would soon produce millions of dollars in oil revenue. Meanwhile, the true Afro-Indigenous families who had cultivated that exact soil were violently evicted. They were left holding newly forged birth certificates and government ledgers that labeled them as outsiders on their own ancestral lands.
It wasn't just land theft. It was the greatest, most profitable identity theft in American history. For over a century, the lies written in those government ledgers held absolute power. The systemic erasure worked exactly as intended, burying the true lineage of countless Black and Indigenous families under a mounting of falsified paperwork. Grandparents passed down oral histories of Native ancestry, stories of great-grandmothers who walked the Trail of Tears, or ancestors who fought in the Florida Everglades. But when their descendants went looking for legal proof to claim their heritage, they hit a brick wall. The paper trail, the birth certificates, the census rolls, said otherwise. It called them colored, it called them Black, it told them their family legends were just myths. But ink on a page can only hide the truth for so long. The bureaucratic violence of the past has finally met its match in the science of the present. Today, we're witnessing a massive, unprecedented reckoning. Millions of Americans are utilizing modern science, waiting for a digital notification that has the power to shatter a century of government lies. When those DNA results come back, they aren't just revealing genetic markers, they are resurrecting erased histories. The data is proving what the elders knew all along. The bloodline survived. The indigenous heritage was never gone, it was simply reclassified. This is the ultimate recovery. People are taking these DNA results, matching them against those altered census records, and finally crossing out the fabricated lines drawn by corrupt bureaucrats. They are reclaiming their rightful place in a history that tried to legally write them out of existence. The paper genocide may have stolen the land, but it could never steal the blood. So the next time you look at a dusty family record, ask yourself, who was holding the pen, and what story were they trying to erase? I want to hear your stories. Have you or your family ever uncovered a hidden truth in your genealogy? Did a DNA test contradict your official family tree? Drop your experience in the comments below. Let's uncover this history together. Make sure to like and subscribe if you want to expose more hidden truths. And remember, the paper trail is only half the story.